Paul Newman was more than just a Hollywood legend. He was a man who built an empire, both on screen and off. Known for his captivating charm and piercing blue eyes, he rose to fame through iconic roles and deep philanthropy. But behind that polished public persona, he faced personal demons and inner struggles that few ever saw. As we uncover the hidden layers of his life, we'll explore the untold story of a man who grappled with immense guilt, family tensions, and the weight of his own legacy. His career might have shaped a generation, but it was his private battles, his regrets, his loss, and his final confession that truly defined him. Today, we'll take you behind the scenes of his legendary life, revealing not just the actor, but the father, the husband, and the complex human behind the myth. This is the emotional truth about Paul Newman, and it may forever change how we remember him. Paul Newman's name has been etched in Hollywood history, and for good reason. With his striking blue eyes and undeniable charisma, he became a cinematic icon, beloved by fans and critics alike. His career spanned decades, and his impact went far beyond just his acting. He was a man who was as committed to his craft as he was to using his fame to make the world a better place. From the moment Paul stepped onto the screen, it was clear that he was a force to be reckoned with. Films like Cool Hand Luke, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and The Color of Money are not just celebrated, they've become staples in American cinema. His portrayals of complex, multifaceted characters, whether as the rebellious, unforgettable Luke or the smooth-talking pool hustler Fast Eddie, showed a depth that was rarely seen in Hollywood at the time. He was more than just a handsome face. He was an actor who brought vulnerability, grit, and heart to every role he played. His performances felt real, raw, and relatable, traits that made him one of the most respected actors of his generation. But, as iconic as his career was, it was his personal commitment to philanthropy that truly set him apart. In 1982, Paul co-founded Newman's Own, a food company that wasn't just about selling products, it was about changing the way business could be done. Every penny of profit generated by Newman's Own went directly to charity. By the time of Paul's passing, the company had donated over $570 million to causes ranging from cancer research and hunger relief to children's education. The simple idea that every dollar earned could make the world a better place became a cornerstone of Paul's legacy. His work with Newman's Own wasn't just a business venture, it was his way of giving back, of turning success into something much more meaningful. Beyond his acting and philanthropy, Paul's life was filled with diverse ventures. He was a businessman who ran his own company, a passionate race car driver who competed at some of the highest levels, and a father who cared deeply about causes that were close to his heart. In the 1980s, he helped create the Serious Fun Children's Network, a global community of camps and programs for children with serious illnesses. These camps offered kids a chance to just be kids, laugh, play, and forget about their conditions for a little while. It's one of the many ways Paul poured his heart into helping others, proving that his legacy wasn't just about the films or the fame. And then there was the matter of his appearance. Those blue eyes, the rugged charm, the effortlessly cool demeanor, they made him a legend. For decades, Paul Newman was the epitome of the Hollywood heartthrob. But as much as his looks made him famous, they were only part of the equation. His true legacy lies deeper, in the way he used his platform to challenge societal norms, to champion justice, and to give back to the world. His fame might have opened doors, but it was his integrity, his kindness, and his unflinching sense of responsibility that made him truly extraordinary. Yet, While Paul's public life was marked by success and admiration, there was more beneath the surface. Behind the adoring crowds, the movie sets, and the headlines was a man struggling with his own personal battles, something many didn't see. His public persona was larger than life, but it often overshadowed the inner turmoil he was experiencing. Fame and fortune, while rewarding, came with their own set of challenges. Challenges that Paul faced quietly, often alone. His struggles were not the kind that could be seen on the red carpet, nor were they the kind that could be fixed with a smile. And as we peel back the layers of his public legacy, it becomes clear that Paul Newman was more than just the charming movie star. He was a man who wrestled with his own demons, a man whose legacy is as complex and multifaceted as the characters he portrayed on screen. While his name became synonymous with greatness, there was another side to Paul Newman, a side that remains largely hidden from the public eye. A man who, despite his vast accomplishments, faced the weight of his own regrets, his insecurities, and his longing for redemption. His career and philanthropic efforts painted a picture of success, but the emotional scars he carried and the personal struggles he endured shaped his life in ways no one could have anticipated. So, while we celebrate the incredible achievements of Paul Newman, we must also recognize the complex, often painful journey that lay behind his public image. His legacy isn't just defined by his films, his philanthropy, or his blue eyes. It's defined by the raw, human experience of a man who, like all of us, battled with his own flaws, mistakes, and regrets. A man who sought peace in the most unlikely places, and whose story continues to resonate long after the camera stopped rolling. As we dive deeper into Paul Newman's life, it's important to remember that behind the accolades, behind the achievements, there was a man trying to make sense of it all. His career, his family, his personal battles. Paul's legacy is more than just his iconic status in Hollywood. It's about the truth that lies beneath, the complexities that make up the human experience. And now, as we explore the untold story of Paul Newman, we see a side of him that was hidden from the world, a side that reveals the man behind the myth. Nell Newman's story is one that mirrors the complexities of the Newman family itself, full of passion, vision, but ultimately marred by tension and division. As the eldest daughter of Paul Newman, Nell was integral to the creation of Newman's Own Organics, a company that was more than just a business venture. It was a continuation of her father's commitment to making a positive impact on the world. In the early 1990s, Nell, with her deep love for organic food and environmental sustainability, helped launch Newman's Own Organics. Her goal was to introduce healthy, organic alternatives to mainstream markets, something that mirrored her father's values of giving back and making a difference through his business. The company quickly became a success, not just because of the quality of its products, but because it carried with it a sense of purpose. Profits were to be donated to charity, just as her father had done with Newman's Own. Nell's involvement wasn't just a nod to her family's legacy. She was the driving force behind Newman's Own Organics, taking the brand to new heights with products like organic pretzels and fig Newtons. Her charisma, determination, and passion for healthy living made her a natural fit for the company's public face. She was seen not just as Paul Newman's daughter, but as an independent force in her own right, contributing to the growing movement of organic food. But what followed was a sudden and mysterious shift. In 2015, a quiet but significant change took place. Nell's image was removed from the label of Newman's Own Organics. This decision caught many off guard, especially considering the fact that she had been such an integral part of the company's rise. The public didn't know the full story behind this removal. Nell, who had once been the bright, visible representation of Newman's Own Organics, seemed to vanish from the company's spotlight. She stopped making public appearances, and her involvement in the company appeared to dwindle. For a family that had always been so closely tied to this brand, this sudden disappearance was perplexing and raised a lot of questions. What had caused the rift? And why had she stepped away from a project that she had been so deeply passionate about? It wasn't just Nell's departure that signaled deeper family struggles. After Paul Newman's death in 2008, the Newman family faced further turmoil as they grappled with issues of control over his estate. The Newman children, who had always been close-knit, began to find themselves divided. The tension centered around Paul's trusted advisor, Robert Forrester, who had been given control over Paul's estate and the management of Newman's own. For the Newman children, the relationship with Forrester was fraught with frustration and growing distrust. They believed that Forrester had mismanaged Paul's $600 million estate, and the direction of Newman's own no longer reflected the values their father had instilled in them. The heart of the issue was simple yet profound: control. Forrester's decisions, they felt, were not in line with Paul's wishes. They accused him of making lavish expenditures, steering the company in a direction that felt distant from Paul's original vision. To them, it wasn't just about the financial mismanagement. It was about betraying the very spirit of Newman's own, a company that had always been about doing good in the world and using its success for philanthropic causes. The family, already reeling from the loss of Paul, now had to face the reality that they were not in control of their father's legacy. The struggle for control wasn't an easy battle. A key factor that prevented the Newman children from taking action was a strict no-contest clause in Paul's will. This clause was put in place to ensure that the family would not challenge his decisions after his passing without risking losing their inheritance altogether. This legal provision left the Newman children in a difficult position. They could not legally contest Forrester's management without jeopardizing their future rights to any inheritance. The clause silenced them, and it became a barrier that no one in the family could cross. In the end, it wasn't until 2019, after allegations of inappropriate behavior by Forrester, that he was removed from his position. However, by then, much of the damage had already been done. The trust between the Newman family and those in charge of managing their father's estate had been irrevocably broken. The fractures were deep, and the pain of betrayal lingered. What should have been a family united in honoring Paul's legacy became a bitter fight over the very spirit of what he had created. Amidst this public and legal turmoil, Paul's youngest daughter, Melissa, took a different approach to preserve her parents' memory. Rather than dive into the corporate battles, Melissa turned to a more personal form of remembrance through a photo book. Head Over Heels was a tribute to the private moments of her parents' life, away from the cameras. In the pages of the book, she shared intimate, never-before-seen moments. Simple joys like fishing trips, quiet family dinners, and the affectionate gestures between her parents that revealed the depth of their love. For Melissa, this book was a way to preserve the essence of her family's bond, showing the world the love and tenderness that existed behind the glossy headlines. Through this collection of memories, Melissa painted a stark contrast to the corporate struggles that plagued the family after Paul's death. While the rest of the world focused on the business of Newman's own and the legal battles over Paul's estate, Melissa chose to focus on the truth of her family's emotional connection. She remembered her father not as a Hollywood icon, but as a man who loved his family, who made time for his children, and who cherished the quiet moments away from the glare of the spotlight. The Newman family's story is a poignant one, filled with both love and loss, triumph and turmoil. What began as a family-driven enterprise, a company that aimed to do good in the world, became a battleground where control, legacy, and trust collided. But beneath the tensions and legal struggles, there remains a story of love and devotion, of a family trying to honor a father whose impact on the world stretched far beyond the silver screen. And though Nell's quiet departure and the internal battles left wounds that may never fully heal, the legacy of Paul Newman, in all its complexity, continues to live on, shaped not just by the films he made, but by the family he left behind. Paul Newman's story began in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, where he grew up in a family that straddled the line between privilege and adversity. While his family ran a successful sporting goods store, Paul's early years were marked by experiences that shaped him in ways he could never have anticipated. The suburb where he grew up was largely Christian, and Paul's father, a Jewish man, faced prejudice that impacted young Paul deeply. It wasn't just the slights he witnessed, it was the feeling of being an outsider, a theme that would echo throughout his life. That sense of being different, of standing apart, laid the groundwork for his future challenges and triumphs. Even as a young boy, Paul had a deep connection to storytelling and performance. His early love for acting started at the Cleveland Playhouse, where he was introduced to the magic of the stage. His time there ignited a passion that would drive his future career. But it wasn't just the thrill of performing that captured him, it was the ability to step into someone else's shoes, to escape the constraints of his own identity, and transform into something entirely different. This early exposure to the theater planted the seeds of what would become a legendary acting career, even though, at the time, Paul had no idea where it would lead. In 1943, the trajectory of Paul's life was altered when he enlisted in the U.S. Navy during World War II. The war would have a profound effect on him, both physically and emotionally. Initially aiming to become a pilot, Paul's plans were derailed when a routine eye test revealed he was colorblind, grounding him from that role. Instead, he trained as a radio operator and rear gunner on torpedo bombers. His service took him to Hawaii, where he was stationed with a unit that was set to join the campaign in Okinawa. Just days before they were due to board the USS Bunker Hill, Paul's crew was grounded due to an ear infection. What followed was nothing short of harrowing. Kamikaze pilots attacked the Bunker Hill, killing hundreds, including many in Paul's unit. That ear infection, which seemed like a minor inconvenience at the time, had spared his life. The war left its mark on Paul in ways that went beyond the physical. The experience of losing so many young men so quickly, of staring death in the face, shifted his understanding of life in a permanent way. It made him appreciate how fragile existence could be, but it also left him with an uneasy understanding of mortality that would haunt him throughout his life. That brush with death forced Paul to confront his own humanity, and though he survived physically, the emotional scars would stay with him forever. After returning home from the war, Paul enrolled at Kenyon College, where he initially pursued a degree in economics. However, the pull of the stage proved too strong to ignore. His time in college and his experiences during the war had opened his eyes to a world of possibility, and soon he was drawn back to the theater. It was at Kenyon that Paul started to immerse himself in acting, finding solace and expression in the world of performance. The more he dived into the craft, the more he realized that acting was where he truly belonged. He decided to leave behind his academic path and pursue a career in theater, a decision that would ultimately lead him to New York City and, later, Hollywood. Moving to New York in the late 1940s, Paul enrolled in the Actors Studio under the mentorship of the legendary Lee Strasberg. This was where Paul would hone his craft, learning the techniques of method acting that would come to define his work. He studied alongside some of the most talented actors of the time, and it was here that he found his voice as an actor, an ability to bring authenticity and raw emotion to every role. His first real break came in 1953 when he landed a role in the Broadway production of Picnic. Though he wasn't cast in the lead role he had hoped for, Paul's performance as Alan Seymour, though smaller in scope, opened the door to greater opportunities. The show's success gave him his first taste of recognition, and from there, his rise in the acting world was inevitable. By the late 1950s, Paul Newman was making waves in Hollywood. His breakthrough came with the 1958 film Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, where he starred opposite Elizabeth Taylor. His performance as the troubled Brick Pollitt marked him as one of the most promising actors of his generation. The role, filled with quiet anguish and internal conflict, allowed Paul to showcase a depth of emotion that set him apart from many of his peers. It was clear that Paul had a unique ability to portray complex, layered characters, and audiences responded to that vulnerability on screen. But despite his success, Paul struggled internally. His personal pain ran deep, and the very success he had worked so hard to achieve only amplified his sense of inadequacy. His battles with self-doubt and personal guilt were never far from the surface. While his career was soaring, his emotional state was anything but stable. Paul often felt like an imposter, unsure of his place in the world. His fame, while bringing him adoration from fans and respect from peers, only served to highlight the emptiness he sometimes felt within. The internal battles were not something Paul could easily share with others. His stoic demeanor often masked the inner turmoil he faced daily. Though he was achieving success beyond his wildest dreams, Paul's personal life was far more complicated. He often struggled to reconcile the man he wanted to be with the man the world saw. The tension between his public image as a suave movie star and his private insecurities created a storm that was difficult to navigate. His sense of guilt, particularly over his past mistakes, weighed heavily on him. But this personal pain also fueled his performances. The characters he played often embodied a quiet suffering, a struggle to be understood, and a yearning for redemption. It was in these roles that reflected the internal battles he fought, that Paul's acting shone brightest. In many ways, Paul Newman's journey was one of constant self-reflection. His early life was shaped by the desire to belong, by the experience of feeling different. His time in the war, which gave him a new outlook on life, left him with scars that would never fully heal. His entry into acting was not just about fame, but about finding a voice, a way to express the complexity of his inner world. And yet, even as he reached the pinnacle of his career, personal pain remained an undercurrent to his achievements. Despite the accolades, the fame, and the recognition, Paul was, at his core, a man haunted by self-doubt, guilt, and the longing to find peace within himself. His journey was not just about becoming a legend, it was about confronting the deep personal struggles that defined him as a person. When Paul Newman first met Joanne Woodward in 1953, their connection was instant and undeniable. The two were cast opposite each other in a Broadway production of Picnic, and from the moment they met, there was an undeniable spark. At the time, Paul was already married with children, but the chemistry between him and Joanne was something neither could ignore. It wasn't just the attraction, it was a deeper bond that neither of them had anticipated. While the professional relationship was their starting point, it was clear that something more was unfolding, something that would change their lives forever. In the years that followed, Paul's marriage to his first wife, Jackie Witt, began to unravel. Their relationship had been strained for some time, largely due to Paul's growing career and the increasing demands of his fame. As his bond with Joanne deepened, the tension within his marriage became impossible to ignore. After several years of emotional distance and inner turmoil, Paul made the difficult decision to leave his first wife and children to be with Joanne. The affair, while deeply painful for all involved, marked the beginning of a new chapter in Paul's life. A chapter that would come to define both his personal and professional journey. Paul and Joanne's relationship was not without its challenges. Their romance wasn't simply about passion, it was about navigating the complexities of fame, family, and commitment. In 1958, Paul and Joanne married in a small, private ceremony in Las Vegas. Despite the public scrutiny that came with their union, they carved out a life together, raising 3 daughters in a way that was as far removed from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood as possible. The couple chose to settle in Connecticut, where they could escape the spotlight and raise their children in a more grounded environment. Their home was one of love, stability, and normalcy, a stark contrast to the chaotic world of fame that Paul had left behind. Throughout their 50-year marriage, Joanne remained Paul's steady anchor, the one constant in his turbulent world. She understood him in ways few others did. She saw beyond the fame, the stardom, and the screen persona to the man beneath. Despite Paul's internal struggles, his emotional distance at times, and his battles with alcohol, Joanne remained steadfast. She loved him not because he was a movie star, but because of the person he was at his core. She was the one who could sit with him through his silences, the one who could help him navigate the pain he often couldn't articulate. In many ways, Joanne was his greatest support, his strength when the world around him was too overwhelming. But their relationship was far from perfect. As Paul's fame grew, so did the pressures of being in the public eye, and their marriage was not immune to the challenges that came with it. Paul, despite his love for Joanne, struggled with emotional distance and the coping mechanisms he often turned to. One of those mechanisms was alcohol. Like many others in the entertainment industry, Paul used alcohol to numb the pain and to deal with the emotional weight he carried. His drinking often created tension between him and Joanne, and though she understood the pressures he faced, the emotional distance it created in their relationship was a challenge they both had to navigate. Yet, through all of the ups and downs, their bond remained strong. Joanne's understanding of Paul's flaws didn't just make her a good partner, it made her the person he could turn to when the world felt too heavy. She was patient, never asking Paul to change, but instead accepting him as he was, imperfections and all. She understood the demons he fought with, and never once faltered in her commitment to him. Paul, in turn, appreciated the quiet strength she offered, and the love that was never conditional, no matter how many mistakes he made. Their relationship was a constant reminder that love is not perfect, but it is resilient. The challenges they faced together, both publicly and privately, became a testament to the depth of their love. Their marriage wasn't just about the years spent together, it was about how they faced life's toughest moments side by side. They experienced great joy, but also heartbreaking tragedy, particularly the loss of Paul's son, Scott, to a drug overdose in 1978. That loss forever altered the dynamics of their family, but it also brought Paul and Joanne closer together. It was during these darker times that their relationship was truly tested. Joanne became Paul's pillar of strength, the one who helped him navigate his grief and guilt, and their love only deepened. Even as Paul's fame continued to soar and his personal struggles persisted, Joanne remained his constant. She understood that their life together would never be perfect, but it would always be theirs. Their bond wasn't defined by the public's perception of them, but by the quiet moments they shared away from the cameras. And though Paul's fame may have placed incredible pressure on their relationship, it also allowed them to build a life together that was defined by mutual respect, deep love, and unwavering support. Through their 50 years together, Paul and Joanne proved that love isn't always easy. It's often messy, complicated, and full of contradictions. But their enduring relationship was built on the foundation of understanding and acceptance. Joanne never expected Paul to be perfect. She loved him through his flaws, his silence, and his struggles, and in doing so, she became the rock he needed. And for Paul, Joanne was more than just a wife. She was his home, the one person who could help him navigate the highs and lows of a life that was as unpredictable as it was extraordinary. Their marriage stands as a testament to the power of love in its rawest form, the kind that can withstand the weight of fame, loss, and personal pain. Through it all, Paul and Joanne showed that real love isn't about perfection. It's about being there for each other when it matters most. And that, in the end, is what made their bond unbreakable. In 1978, Paul Newman faced a devastating loss that would forever alter the course of his life: the death of his son, Scott. At just 28 years old, Scott died from a drug overdose, a tragic event that shattered Paul and Joanne. Scott had struggled with substance abuse for years, and despite their efforts to help him, Paul and Joanne were unable to save him from the demons that ultimately took his life. For Paul, the pain of losing his son was unbearable. As a father, he was consumed by guilt. He wondered if he had failed Scott, if there was something more he could have done, or if he had somehow missed the signs of his son's struggles. The grief Paul and Joanne felt was private, raw, and consuming. While the world continued to turn, they were left to face the crushing weight of their loss alone. Paul's public persona, once so confident and composed, was now clouded by an overwhelming sense of failure and sadness. He had played the role of a father in many of his films, but in real life, he felt like he had let his son down. The guilt was not just about the loss. It was about the years of absence, the mistakes he had made as a father, and the feeling that he had not been there for Scott in the way he should have been. Even as he continued his public life, this personal tragedy haunted him. In the wake of Scott's death, Paul took action, hoping to make sense of the pain and to turn his grief into something that could help others. He founded the Scott Newman Center, a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating young people about the dangers of substance abuse. The center was born out of Paul's desire to make sure that other families didn't have to experience the heartache that his family had endured. He poured his heart into this mission, hoping that, through education and awareness, other children could be spared the same fate as his son. The center became his way of apologizing for the things he couldn't change and of making a difference in Scott's memory. Yet, even as Paul channeled his grief into this cause, the loss continued to haunt him in ways that were difficult to escape. Scott's death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It became a shadow that followed Paul throughout the rest of his life. It affected his relationships with his other children, his ability to fully connect with them, and even his marriage to Joanne. The pain was something they all felt, though no one spoke of it openly. Paul's emotional distance, which had been a struggle throughout his life, grew even more pronounced after Scott's death. He had been unable to save his son, and that sense of failure lingered over him, coloring every aspect of his life. It made him more withdrawn, more guarded, and more distant from those he loved. Scott's death also deeply affected Paul's view of fatherhood. As much as he tried to give love to his other children, the guilt from losing Scott made it harder for him to fully embrace the role of father again. He was a man who had spent so much of his life feeling that he wasn't good enough, and the loss of his son only reinforced those feelings. He questioned his ability to be a good father and whether he had truly been there for Scott in a way that mattered. Even as he continued his career and philanthropic efforts, the loss was always with him, a reminder of his own flaws, his inability to protect his son, and the fatherly love that was left unfulfilled. Joanne, too, was deeply affected by Scott's death. While she was the emotional anchor in their relationship, the loss left her grieving in her own way. She, too, carried the guilt and pain of Scott's struggles. But she remained Paul's steadfast partner throughout the ordeal. Joanne never judged him for his emotional distance. She understood that his grief was overwhelming, and that it would take time for him to heal, if healing was even possible. The two of them, in their quiet way, dealt with the pain together, never allowing the world to see the full weight of what they were carrying. As the years went on, Paul's grief remained a part of him. He never fully healed from the loss of Scott. It colored his view of the world and of his role as a father. The man who had been so magnetic and confident in front of the cameras was now a man who wrestled with a deep, unspoken sorrow. It was a sorrow that could never be fixed with any amount of success or recognition. It was the kind of grief that left a permanent scar, a reminder of the son he lost, the father he couldn't be, and the guilt that would never fully disappear. In the public eye, Paul continued to build his legacy, both through his acting and his philanthropy. But privately, Scott's death remained the one piece of his life that he couldn't fix. It wasn't just a chapter in his story. It was a chapter that reshaped everything about him. And as Paul worked tirelessly to support the Scott Newman Center, he did so not just as a father who had lost his son, but as a man who was still searching for redemption, still grappling with the loss of the person he loved most. The organization became a living tribute to Scott, a way for Paul to give back in the only way he knew how. But as much as Paul tried to make a difference in the world, he knew there was one thing he could never change, the one loss that defined the rest of his life. After decades of living in the public eye, Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward made a decision that would change the course of their lives. They stepped away from the limelight. In the years following their personal tragedies, including the loss of their son Scott, they chose to leave the chaos of Hollywood behind and seek peace in the quiet of rural Connecticut. There, they built a home away from the glitz and the glamour, a place where they could focus on what truly mattered: family, healing, and simplicity. In the tranquility of the countryside, Paul and Joanne found refuge from the pressures of fame, creating a life that was as far removed from the public eye as possible. Their life in Connecticut was a far cry from the Hollywood image that many had come to associate with Paul and Joanne. They didn't need to live in a mansion or host extravagant parties. Instead, they found joy in the simplest moments, gardening together in their backyard, sharing family dinners, and spending quiet nights at home. These simple routines gave Paul a sense of purpose and fulfillment that he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just playing a role on screen or living up to the expectations of the world around him. In Connecticut, he could just be himself. The peace of the land allowed him to reconnect with the things that truly mattered, away from the noise of Hollywood. In this new chapter of their lives, Paul's transformation began. As he spent more time in the quiet of their Connecticut home, he became a more present father and husband, trying to become the man and father he had always wanted to be. No longer consumed by the frantic pace of his career, Paul began to fully appreciate the moments he had with his daughters, becoming a more involved and attentive father. He had missed so much in the early years, but now, with the benefit of hindsight and the peace of rural life, he was determined to make the most of the time he had left with them. This change wasn't just about his role as a father. It affected how Paul viewed his career as well. After spending decades at the top of his profession, Paul began to make choices about acting that reflected a quieter, more grounded version of himself. Gone were the roles that sought to flaunt his star power. Instead, he gravitated toward projects that held deeper meaning, ones that spoke to the more introspective side of his personality. He became more selective in the roles he took on, prioritizing stories that resonated with him on a personal level. His films took on a different tone, one that reflected his own growth, his journey toward self-acceptance, and his desire to leave behind something that mattered more than fame. In these quiet years, Paul's priorities shifted. He wasn't interested in chasing the next big role or securing another Oscar nomination. He had already achieved so much in his career. Now, it was about finding fulfillment on his own terms. He focused on roles that had substance, characters that reflected his own values and personal struggles. His choices in acting were no longer dictated by the pursuit of recognition, but by the search for a deeper connection to his craft. The pressures of fame had begun to dissipate, and in their place, Paul was left with a desire to create work that felt meaningful. This period of reflection and transformation wasn't just about Paul's professional life. It was also about him finally accepting the man he had become. The man who had once struggled with guilt, doubt, and emotional distance now sought peace. He embraced the quieter moments with his family, and through this newfound focus on his personal life, he was able to heal wounds that had plagued him for years. His life in Connecticut allowed him to find balance, to take a step back from the chaotic world he had once inhabited, and to rebuild the relationships that had suffered as a result of his fame and personal struggles. Paul's time in Connecticut marked the beginning of a more authentic version of himself. It was a time for him to let go of the expectations of the outside world and finally embrace the role of a father, a husband, and a man who had lived through both great triumphs and immense heartache. With Joanne by his side, he found the space to reflect on his past, to reconnect with what was truly important, and to focus on the people who had always mattered most: his family. The peace and simplicity of their life in Connecticut gave Paul the opportunity to be the man he had always hoped to be. And in doing so, he found a sense of fulfillment that fame and accolades had never been able to provide. In the quiet of Connecticut, Paul Newman found the clarity and peace he had been searching for throughout his life. His time away from Hollywood allowed him to become more than just the star on screen. He became the father and husband he had always wanted to be. Through this period of reflection and transformation, Paul rediscovered the joy of simple living, the beauty of being present, and the value of family. It was in this quiet time that Paul was finally able to rebuild his life, not just as a Hollywood icon, but as the man who had finally found peace within himself. In the mid-1970s, Paul Newman found himself at a crossroads. He was already an established Hollywood legend, known for his striking blue eyes and powerful performances. Yet, in his 40s, Paul sought something more than the fame and accolades that came with his acting career. What he discovered wasn't just a new hobby, it was a passion that would later define a chapter of his life. It all started when he began training for a role in the film Winning, 1969, where he played a race car driver. Initially, the focus was simply on preparing for the role, but as he spent more time at the track, something clicked within him. Racing wasn't just about the film, it was about something deeper, a way to experience life with intensity, freedom, and control. What started as preparation for a role evolved into a full-blown passion. Racing became a means of reclaiming freedom for Paul, a way to escape the weight of fame and to feel alive in a way he hadn't in years. The racetrack was a world that didn't care about his fame, his past, or his public persona. It was just him and the car, competing against time and other drivers. There was no script, no audience, just the raw, unfiltered experience of speed and precision. Paul's love for racing quickly outgrew the role he initially took it on for, and it became a defining aspect of his life outside of Hollywood. In 1979, Paul Newman achieved one of the most surprising and impressive feats of his racing career. He finished in second place at the prestigious 24 Hours of Le Mans, one of the most grueling endurance races in the world. His performance, in which he showed both speed and determination, solidified his place in the racing world, not just as a celebrity participant, but as a skilled competitor. This achievement proved that Paul wasn't just dabbling in racing for fun. He was serious about it, and his dedication to mastering the sport was evident. But it wasn't just about individual accomplishments. In 1983, Paul co-founded Newman Haas Racing, a team that would go on to compete in the IndyCar series. What started as a way to stay involved in the sport he loved soon became a successful racing team. Newman Haas Racing became one of the most successful teams in the sport, earning multiple championships and victories. But Paul's involvement wasn't driven by the desire for more fame or recognition. It was about passion, commitment, and a sense of redemption. Racing allowed him to express a side of himself that acting no longer could, one that was raw, untamed, and full of the kind of adrenaline that gave him a sense of purpose in the later years of his life. While racing may have offered Paul the thrill he was seeking, it was his philanthropic efforts through Newman's Own that became the most lasting and profound aspect of his legacy. In 1982, Paul turned a homemade salad dressing into a thriving business, co-founding Newman's Own with the simple yet powerful idea that every penny of profit would be donated to charity. It wasn't just a marketing gimmick, it was a life philosophy. Paul wasn't interested in using his success to amass wealth for himself. Instead, he believed that his fortune could be a force for good in the world. Newman's Own became a major success, and by the time Paul passed away in 2008, the company had donated more than $570 million to various causes. It wasn't just about food products, it was about making a tangible difference. The money raised through the sales of Newman's Own went to support a wide array of charitable causes, from cancer research to education to hunger relief. Paul's desire to give back to the world was evident in everything he did, but Newman's Own became the primary vehicle for his philanthropy. Perhaps most notably, Paul's commitment to children's causes set him apart from other celebrities. In 1988, he founded the Serious Fun Children's Network, a global organization that provides camp experiences for children with serious illnesses. The camps blended fun and medical care, giving kids the opportunity to experience joy and adventure despite their challenges. Today, the Serious Fun Network continues to operate and support children's hospitals and other organizations that provide care to children battling life-threatening conditions. The success of Newman's Own wasn't just about the impact it had financially, but about the lasting legacy Paul created through his belief that business could be a force for good. His legacy as a philanthropist is one that continues to live on, and it's a testament to the man he became, a man who used his fame not to build his own fortune, but to help those who needed it most. In the end, Paul Newman's true legacy wasn't just his career in Hollywood or his iconic blue eyes. It was his commitment to making the world a better place, both through his philanthropy and his dedication to causes that mattered. Racing gave him freedom, but his work through Newman's Own gave him something even more powerful: a lasting impact on the world, one that continues to inspire others to use their success for good. Whether it was on the racetrack, on the silver screen, or through the charitable work he championed, Paul Newman's life was defined by a relentless drive to leave the world better than he found it. And in doing so, he created a legacy that goes far beyond anything Hollywood could offer. Paul Newman's final years were marked by quiet reflection and a sense of closure. After decades of living in the spotlight, the man who had captivated audiences with his charm and brilliance withdrew from the public eye, seeking peace in the comfort of his family. In 2008, at the age of 83, Paul passed away at home in Westport, Connecticut. Surrounded by those he loved most, Joanne Woodward, his wife of over 50 years, was by his side during his final moments. There were no grand gestures, no public displays of mourning, just a private, peaceful end to a remarkable life. The world had watched Paul Newman for so many years, but in his final days, he chose the intimacy of family, the quiet of home, and the love that had been his foundation for so long. During his last moments, Paul revealed to those closest to him the deep regrets that had haunted him throughout his life. While his legacy was one of immense public success, the man behind the myth was burdened by personal doubts. Paul confessed that he had always struggled with the idea of being the perfect father. The guilt of his past, particularly his perceived failure to be there for his son Scott, weighed heavily on him. Despite his fame and accomplishments, Paul never truly believed he had lived up to the expectations he set for himself as a father and as a man. His insecurities ran deeper than anyone knew. Even as he sat at the pinnacle of success, Paul wrestled with the complexity of fame, the masks he wore, the pressure he felt, and the isolation that came with being one of the most famous faces in the world. Though Paul Newman's career spanned over 5 decades, and his roles in films like Cool Hand Luke and Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid became legendary, his true legacy may not lie solely in his cinematic achievements. The roles he played on screen were unforgettable, yes, but it was the man behind the roles, the real Paul Newman, that left the deepest impact. Paul was not just an actor. He was a philanthropist, a businessman with a conscience, and a father who, despite his flaws, sought to make the world a better place. His legacy extends far beyond the trophies, the awards, and the accolades. Perhaps what stands out most about Paul's legacy is the way he used his fame to help others. His philanthropic work, especially through Newman's Own, became one of his most meaningful achievements. The decision to give every penny of profit away to charity was revolutionary, and it has had a lasting impact on countless lives. Through his charitable efforts, Paul made a difference in areas such as cancer research, education, and hunger relief. His work showed that fame could be used for good, that celebrity status could be leveraged not for personal gain, but for the betterment of others. This spirit of giving is perhaps his most enduring contribution, one that continues to inspire those who follow in his footsteps. Beyond his philanthropy, it was Paul's quiet humanity that left the strongest impression on those who knew him best. He was a man who, despite his fame, sought authenticity in everything he did. He was deeply aware of his own shortcomings and was unafraid to confront them. In his final years, Paul's reflections revealed a complexity that went far beyond the silver screen. He had spent much of his life wrestling with the weight of public expectations, but as he aged, he came to appreciate the value of simply being himself, without the facade of Hollywood. His human side, his imperfections, his deep love for his family, and his desire to do good in the world became what he cherished most. The real Paul Newman was not the character he portrayed in front of cameras, but the man who gave back, who cared deeply, and who sought to heal the wounds he carried. The legacy Paul left behind is also carried forward by his daughters, Melissa and Clea, who continue to honor his memory through their own efforts. Melissa, in particular, has worked to preserve the values that Paul held dear, advocating for the causes he championed and ensuring that Newman's own remains true to the mission he set in motion. Clea, too, has followed in her father's footsteps, supporting philanthropic initiatives and staying true to the quiet, yet powerful principles that Paul lived by. Their efforts are a testament to the lasting influence Paul had on his family, as well as on the world around him. The legacy of Newman's own lives on, not just as a company, but as a symbol of Paul's belief that business could serve the greater good, and that true success is measured by the lives you touch, not the wealth you accumulate. Paul Newman may have been an icon, but it is the depth of his character, the man behind the legend, that will always be remembered. His greatest contributions were not the films he starred in, but the way he lived his life, with humility, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to helping others. As we reflect on his life and legacy, we see a man who, through both his triumphs and his struggles, touched the lives of countless individuals, inspiring others to be better, do better, and give back to the world. His story reminds us that the true measure of a life well lived is not in the awards we collect or the fame we achieve, but in the kindness we show, the lives we impact, and the love we give. As we look back on the life of Paul Newman, we are faced with a complex question. What haunted him more? The heartbreaking loss of his son, Scott, or the nagging sense that fame, while providing him with so much, was ultimately a mask that concealed deeper struggles within? Paul Newman was a man who built a remarkable legacy, not just through his iconic films, but through his relentless pursuit of purpose and meaning in a world that often felt superficial and fleeting. His achievements on the screen were undeniable, but it was his personal battles, the demons he faced behind the fame, that truly shaped him. He was a man who sought redemption, who fought to be a better father, and who used his fame to help others, even as he struggled with the weight of his own insecurities. In the end, Paul was more than just a Hollywood star. He was a human being, complicated and imperfect, navigating the challenges of love, loss, and legacy. The journey of Paul Newman reveals the depths of family, love, pain, and the legacy we leave behind. His story shows us that even the most iconic figures are not immune to the struggles that define us all: loss, regret, and the search for meaning. Despite his immense fame, Paul was a man who never truly found peace within himself, haunted by the mistakes of his past and the inability to fully make sense of his place in the world. Yet, in his final years, Paul found solace in his family and his philanthropic work, and he left a legacy that continues to inspire and make a difference. As we reflect on Paul Newman's life, we invite you to think about the weight he carried. What do you think haunted him the most? His son's tragic death, or the realization that his fame was both a gift and a burden? His story is a reminder that no one is immune to the complexities of life, even those who seem larger than life. We've shared the untold story of a man whose legacy transcends his fame, a man whose heart, struggles, and triumphs have impacted countless lives. But what do you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What part of Paul's journey resonated with you the most? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories that dive deeper into the lives of the legends we thought we knew. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts on the complex, emotional journey of one of Hollywood's greatest icons.